Okay, great. Looks like we've kind of reached critical mass here. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Keith Diedrich with Steba Systems. I'm the marketing manager for North America. We are joined here by James with Steba Systems and Michael with Amplify. We're here today to talk about accelerating ESG impact through your automotive data. I'm here to moderate this session, so if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and then we can circle back at the end of our presentation and start to answer. With that, I'll kick it over to James to introduce himself. James?
Yep. Hi, I'm James Van Pelt. I'm the Industry Manufacturing Practice Director for Steba Systems. I've been in the industry 25 years in manufacturing. I didn't naturally come from data, but my manufacturing company that I own and ran supplied a lot into automotive and various other manufacturing functions. So I'm eager to kind of share my experiences and kind of what I've found and learned over the years. And Michael.
Yep, thank you, James. My name is Michael Ayanwale, Director of Consulting Services with Amplify. I've been in consulting for over 15 years, but specifically in MDM for 10 years. I'm definitely excited to have this conversation around automotive data and impact to ESG. Been on different automotive projects, so excited to have this conversation.
Great, thank you both. With that being said, with the perils of working from home, I'm going to jump off webcam for bandwidth issues, just to make sure we don't have any hiccups, and I will kick it over to the gentleman to start the slides. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, this is just a little bit more of what we're going to cover today. If Keith, you want to forward over to kind of the start of it, and we'll go right on ahead, because I'm going to kind of start off with kind of the demand for sustainable products. Everyone's got them, from consumer to vendor to supplier. There's an extreme demand right now, and it's kind of an obvious statement, kind of brief overview of what you already know. Automotive, much like direct-to-consumer manufacturers, realize that people have become increasingly conscious about what they buy, specifically that they're no longer merely concerned about performance, aesthetics, price of vehicles. They're more increasingly evaluating the environmental impact of their choices, along with the perception of what the company stands for. So, consumers are naturally influenced by aspects of sustainability now more so than ever, and it extends well beyond fuel efficiency and emissions. So begs the question, what are they looking for? Keith, if you want to forward to the next. It's a product that's environmentally friendly. That, I think, that becomes obvious, but the specific lifestyle of the vehicle itself, including manufacturing and disposal. So if there's ethical sourcing of the materials, that goes a long way. Energy efficiency production processes. And a lot of people ask, is the vehicle components, recyclable? So in social perception, they look at brands based on commitment, labor practices, local economic development, and community engagement. Companies that invest in the well-being of the workforce, and those that develop technologies like advanced driver systems and other things that are reducing accidents on the roads with pedestrians. So because of this, you've got some numbers here, and basically electric vehicle sales have increased in the U.S. around to 900,000 car sales, I think, were sold last year, according to Statistica, and that's up from 600,000 the year before. McKinsey & Company found that around 33% of consumers consider environmental factors as one of the top 3 reasons why someone would make a purchase. You see now anymore, everywhere you look, corporate sustainability records and reports are being released as a standard practice where they weren't before. Government policies have become more prevalent at reducing emissions, and that actually goes as far as offering subsidies, tax benefits, stricter emission standards, just anything to encourage consumers to opt for more sustainable options. And then eco-friendly models that you see out there, more and more increasing the number of hybrid and electrical vehicles are out there, not only for the good for the environment, but their resale value is higher. So if you skip over to the next slide, given all that, let's go to ESG compliance. And what does that really include? So it's assessments. ESG assessments involve a systematic evaluation of automotive practices, policies, and performance in relation to environmental, social, and governance criteria through standardized framework, certificates and certifications that cover various aspects, and that could be ISO 14001 or LEEDs, anything that's encased in vehicles, the use of recyclable materials too as well. Passports that offer transparency and traceability through vehicle's life cycle. And so when you start thinking about all those things, you want to get into the main reason for our discussion today. We need to talk about, and this is kind of the core thing that I'm all about when you get past all the obviousness, is that we need to talk about how to accelerate the collection of all that data and the information that's driving around to be able to generate what consumers are really looking for. So if you go to the next. So, emission regulations are set by environmental regulation industries. This includes compliance with emissions, limits for pollutants like carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and other particulate matter. Safety standards. People want to know that it assesses features such as airbags, analog brake systems, and electronic stability control systems. They want to know fuel efficiency. They want to know corporate average fuel economy. Noise regulations, recalls, defects, electromagnetic compatibility to ensure that your car does not interfere with other things around it, and the material regulations that are used in the construction, ensuring they meet safety and they don't contain any hazardous substances. Cybersecurity regulations, country-specific regulations, because you have a global product, but you also are selling it locally. So how do the regulations apply there? And then general environmental regulations that involve the end of the life cycle, disposable, recycling of use of environmental friendly materials. But with all of that, and it's a lot of stuff, how do you integrate the various formats, the systems to share the data in an acceptable and consistent way? And with that, Michael's going to be able to speak upon kind of how we kind of govern over all of
that. Thank you, James. So I want to speak to 3 data management principles that relate to the automotive industry and how it impacts your ESG rating. The first one is conforming to automotive standardized data formats. The second one is data governance and regulatory compliance. And the third one, and we'll touch on this later in this conversation, speaks to technology and data quality. Okay, so for those who are relatively new to the automotive industry, there are standardized formats that can be leveraged to syndicate parts data from a supplier to a retailer or to a distributor. There's PIES, which is the Product Information Exchange Standard. And basically what that is, it supports the product data and pricing information that you see for a part. Next is ACES, which is the Aftermarket Catalog Exchange Standard, and that supports the automotive application, so the fitment data. So if you ever walked into an Advance store and you needed a battery for your car, you normally would give the person behind the counter the make and model of your vehicle, right? And he will provide that list of parts that kind of fits that vehicle. So that's when we speak to that is the ACES data that you see related to that use case. And then there's also in the EU, there's TechDoc, which is the largest product fitment data aggregator in the EU. And it's actually owned by the manufacturer of the parts. So how is this important and relevant to ESG? Well, if you go to the next slide, standardization drives data, right? So the more that you can standardize your data from a retailer, from the supplier down to the end consumer, the more better the data is, the more valuable it is, and the more accurate the data is. So information around hazardous material, how to handle parts appropriately, country of origin, are all important information for parts, right? So consumers need that information, retailers need that information, in order to make buying decisions. And knowing where the part is sourced from is also important for ESG. Having a standardized format helps increase efficiencies. It saves suppliers and distributors and retailers money. So at the end of the day, as you have that product information, right, you want to sell to the consumer, and you want the consumer to have more information so they can make better buying decisions. It reduces supply chain costs and increases how quickly a product is handed to the hands of the consumer. So if you kind of think of a workflow, right, there's been situations and projects that I've been on where information is needed, right, on a particular part, whether it's the safety data sheet, features and benefits. Normally that information is coming from the manufacturer, but if you don't have that information, what do? Do you just sit on that workflow until you get it? So it kind of just creates a bottleneck until you have that information so you can syndicate it. And also it provides information to the consumer on how to maintain or update their vehicles, which can make a positive impact to the environment, right? So there have been times where, I buy a particular part for a car and, I'm just not aware of how to dispose of the old equipment, right? But the PIEs or ACEs information would help within that scenario on how to maintain or dispose of the old part, which has a positive impact to the environment. So moving on to data governance and regulatory compliance. This is another aspect that is important to an ESG rating for an organization. So if an organization is committed to ESG, one of the first strategic initiatives addressed is establishing a data governance program. Go to the next one. So automotive companies with an implemented data governance framework can reap the benefits of ESG by investing in data stewards and data owners that are responsible for management and syndication of the data throughout the organization, right? So making sure that you identify, those data stewards, the data owners, the people that are responsible for that flow of data, the attribution, where it's going is helpful and critical for the data governance process. Developing business process to ensure the organization is creating products and services that align with the business ESG objectives, right? So if you're looking to implement ESG, I'm sure that you have objectives outlined, but you want to also make sure that you have your business process aligned with those goals. And then also implementing business validation and rules. It helps validate the data as meeting the organization's environment, social, and governance standards, right? So you may have business rules or validations to check on the product data within the organization to ensure that they have the right attribution, making sure that they are meeting compliance standards and regulatory standards as well. So business rules and validations can help with that within the data governance process.
So with all that, that's a lot of data to bring in. There's a lot of things that you need to do, but you got to ask yourself, how am I going to go about governing all that data? What are the best practice steps? And that's kind of really what we want to focus on here. And one of the key things, and a shameless plug for Stilo Systems, but you really need a centralized platform. And with that centralized platform, it gives you one trusted source of data across the organization. It's going to ensure that consistent, accurate, up-to-date information about suppliers, materials, and products, and more. And this is going to start your foundation to ESG scoring. And where that goes is that what you have to do is you got to integrate systems with all these different systems, from suppliers to multiple ERPs, your PLM systems, so on and so forth. You want to enable a seamless data flow through a centralized platform to minimize the manual data entry, because that always leads to errors or inconsistencies. You want to govern accuracy and completeness, and you want to reduce the risk of errors. But most of all, you want to normalize the formats, because by normalizing the formats and going on to the standardized, data collection, kind of along what Michael said, you're able to establish standardized templates, protocols for collecting ESG-related data from suppliers, manufacturers, and other stakeholders. You can keep lines of communication in real time, especially with ESG data. You're able to engage with suppliers, manufacturers, partners, collect and automate relevant information and updates. The data validation is a very important key of that too, and you want to go through and cleanse your data. Regularly validate, cleanse the data to eliminate any inconsistencies, errors, duplications, because without this, your ESG score is going to be in serious jeopardy. Define some metrics and indicators that contribute to the overall score, whether it's carbon emissions, waste reduction, labor practices, ethical sourcing, and then implement an ESG rating framework. And that's, various standards like GRI, SSAB, TCFD that align with the automotive sector's priorities. And then capture that data, capture it from various sources and systems, so it streamlines the data collection process, reduces manual effort, and enhances your accuracy. Because transparency and traceability throughout this whole entire process is about providing that clear information about not only the data sources but the methodologies of capturing the data and the calculations to determine your ESG score. So after you've done all that, perform regular audits. Regular audits of your data governance practices to identify areas of improvement, and then maintain that culture of continuous improvement. Regularly review and refine your data centralization process, adapt to changing industry standards because they change all the time, and all the evolving ESG requirements. And the easiest thing probably for everybody, they just want a freaking report. They want to be able to visualize what's being captured. So being able to normalize that, collect it all in one place allows different stakeholders to access and interpret these ESG scores and all the underlying data within it. So Michael can speak a lot more to the regulatory compliance that's involved and how it's measured on the next slide.
Yeah, so I think we're all aware that in regards to regulatory compliance and standards, there's a big push, right, across the United States, Canada, the EU, and around the world, right, to better improve emission standards, alternate fuels. So the second bullet point is just an example of information coming from the International Energy Agency. There's an increase, right, of the sales of electric vehicles from around 4% in 2020 to 14% in 2022. And we think that that percentage is going to continue to grow. If you think about your friends or even maybe yourself, if you're thinking or considering purchasing a new vehicle, electric vehicles are probably in your consideration, right? And that's being driven by a lot of the compliance standards that you're seeing out in the market. Alternate fuels are also being considered as well. As I was looking into and doing research into this, I found that Toyota is making a big push for a hydrogen concept car as well. So along with auto manufacturers, governments and social advocates are pushing for a change when it comes to emission standards and greenhouse standards within the industry. Go to the next. So how can an automotive organization measure the data, measure if the data is meeting or exceeding their ESG reporting standards? So there are a couple of questions that you can ask your organization. Is the data complete? So are all the known materials, chemicals, substance reference to the part known? If it's no, then chances are that the organization will probably have a low environmental score. Are the vehicle and parts produced in a safe and ethical environment? So are the employees working in a safe environment? Are the employees treated fairly? Are the employees compensated fairly? If the answer is no, chances are that the organization will have a low sustainable score. Are suppliers and vendors in compliance with domestic and international laws and regulatory bodies? So are the materials sourced lawfully? Are domestic and international laws being violated in order to do business? So those are some of the questions that you may have to do internal investigation, as you're evaluating your ESG score. If your answer is no here, chances are the organization will have a low governance score. All right, so Kind of shifting gears here, I want to speak on the technology and the data quality aspect of ESG. So data quality from an automotive perspective can be viewed as ensuring that all possible information about a vehicle is available to the consumer. And as we go into emerging markets of electric vehicles, autonomous driving, ride sharing technologies, they're just adding to the complexity to the automotive industry. The automotive industry now requires quality data to help with the operations and predictive analytics necessary for a sustainable future. Go to next. So I want to touch on, those three aspects. So electric vehicles, artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles, and ride sharing apps. So in regards to electric vehicles, the production of a vehicle is less focused on optimizing hundreds of parts to gain efficiency. It's driven by engineering, technology, and data to support the business model. So advanced vehicles that, if you look at the Teslas and the new Mustang that is the EV, a large component of those vehicles is the ability to capture data points about the vehicle, data about the driver, data about the destination. And in return, the manufacturers are leveraging the data to improve their production and supply chain networks, right? So they're collecting a lot of this data, even when the vehicle is just in park and being charged. In regards to AI and autonomous vehicles, these vehicles operate on AI features. However, the AI is only as good as the data that is received. So, I know that ChatGPT is now popular now, but the data is only as good as the data that it can source from. So autonomous vehicles need reliable data for advanced GPS, light detection and ranging, and processing graphics for visualization for passengers. And then in regards to autonomous vehicles, the technology is really useful and critical to ensure that they work appropriately. So making sure that the vehicle is up to date on the latest software, infotainment information, predictive maintenance are all important and are driven by data quality. And then also just kind of speaking to the ride sharing apps, they're tapping into the auto industry as well. Now drivers have the ability to rent cars to taxi passengers. So this is helping with, car sales globally and the need for additional parts. However, now there's additional passengers and cars on the road. So now a lot of apps like Uber are basically tracking their emission output that their vehicles are producing, and using that information to kind of curb carbon emissions throughout the world. And I hand it over to James.
And now it's kind of onto the data that kind of identifies what you can't control. And that's kind of your supply chain of raw materials. It's very hard to track that when you're talking about complex supply chains. You're trying to identify tracing the origin of raw materials, various components, parts. That all can be very challenging, especially when you're dealing with suppliers from different regions, different countries, but more so different IT capabilities. So that data collection and verification from suppliers across the supply chain could be pretty daunting. And especially when you're talking about levels of ESG that they have available, their data, its completeness, the quality, and therefore you got to go in and kind of verify the accuracy. So those diverse reporting standards come into play too as well, and it makes it a challenge to integrate systems and standardize the data so that you can use it for people further downstream or reporting for easier traceability. So that limited visibility also provides a challenge because it hinders the ability to even track down to third-party suppliers, because usually a supplier getting something had a value add in it from somewhere. So that vague, kind of transparency in there causes blind spots in your ESG reporting. So you want to have continual supplier engagement, but sometimes they're hard to track down, and you're sitting there waiting for information that you need for your ESG reporting, and it's just not there. So eventually you have changing supplier landscapes, either through like mergers and acquisitions. That can also cause gaps in data continuity. Third-party verifications, even though they help, they do provide another layer of complexity. And then you have the dynamic regulatory environment, because different ESG guidelines are patterned all over the world globally. So you're not quite sure what you're producing to, what compliance or regulatory you're trying to comply with. So, and then you've got cost and resource constraints. With all this going on, it does require a significant amount of financial and human resources. And this is where centralized governance kind of comes in as key. It provides a data repository for ESG related data, enabling easy access and management from data from supplier systems and products. It standardizes the reporting formats. And this is very important because it standardizes classifications, definitions. It facilitates consistent ESG reporting across suppliers and systems. It audits and looks at your data quality and data validation, cleansing capabilities, ensuring the accuracy and completeness of your ESG data. And then you have continuous real-time supplier collaboration. This is a secure platform in many cases, if you have one established, where you can collect various amounts of data, increase supplier engagement, and it kind of minimizes the resistance from them before you onboard them as a supplier or much less a product. And then you can integrate from disparate systems or individual siloed systems, so that can overcome the challenge to access what's not readily available. And then you have that real-time visibility into supplier data, allowing for continuous monitoring of ESG metrics. And then regulatory compliance is incorporated with all the data validation rules, ensuring that collected that ESG data aligns with your latest regulations, reporting set standards. And then traceability across channels, systems, locations, and suppliers is following that breadcrumb trail of where did this part come, where did it come from, but more importantly, where did it go? And that's very important when it comes to recalls. But in ESG reporting, able to prove out that, listen, what we said we are doing in the ESG score, we did. Here's the traceability to prove it. And being able to provide that data quickly and seamlessly is so crucial. So to help with that, you have automated data collection through integration with suppliers, reducing the manual efforts, but most important, reducing the errors. And then you can monitor your supplier's performances. And then you do efficient auditing, which is also leads to cost efficiency. So people ask, what about those other critical data points for ESG that Michael spoke about a little bit ago? Keith, if you want to roll over. This is kind of what the framework kind of looks like when you're kind of looking at this from a data integration point. So this is kind of just showing the kind of the workflow that's involved when you're onboarding a supplier, how it goes through a supplier record, how you're creating basic supplier account records. Then you're triggering approval workflows and trigger sending an invitation. Then you have kind of a review and approval process, assigning codes and classifications. You enrich and validate, and then you even look at a supplier's risk data, and then you do mandatory checks and supplier notifications. All this thing goes on before it starts hitting your systems and then being pushed downstream. So this is just a visual overflow of what I spoke about in the previous slide. But on the other things, when it comes to safety related standards that Michael spoke about, if you want to skip to the next slide, Keith. And this is where they just started talking about, look, we want to look at safety standards. That's going to be a very, very big thing for a consumer to look at when they want to look at, I want to look at the current vehicle designs, crash test performances, and how they're going to incorporate some of these advanced driver assistance systems. They also want to see safety data, look at the accident rates, the recalls, and kind of the pedestrian data, because they start focusing in on that. How are some of these advancements, how are they helping, accidents involving people crossing the road? And then a bicyclist, another one. And then safety matrix, are you putting in the correct supplier criteria? Or do you have connecting systems? And how are you monitoring the success and the metrics of some of these I know I don't trust them sometimes, but those autonomous vehicles out there that are driving themselves, how are we using metrics to determine whether or not these are efficient or they should be pulled back until the technology is improved? And then if you want to go to the next, Keith. So beyond that, you have the social perception, which is very, very important because people want to know that they're doing business with a very ethical company. So you want to look at their diversity and inclusion, their hiring practices, their labor practices, and how they're involved in their community. You also want to make sure they're environment friendly, that they provide ethical practices not only within the organization, but also with suppliers. And their commitment, are they committed to it, or are they just sticking it on to a advertisement and saying we are? Many people, they want to look a little deeper than just, a slogan. So they want to look for companies that are self-governing. They're very transparent. They provide a lot of engagement, but they're also leaders in their field. There's someone that goes out and they don't wait for other people to do it first to determine it was the right thing to do. And that's very key when looking at something from a consumer level, but leading into the next slide, very important for the investors. So investors, they want to look at the very same things. They want to look at a company and kind of assess their risk mitigation. They want to recognize the ESG factors, climate change, emission standards, and they want to look for companies who are prepared for that, not only just now, but where they look like the legislation and regulations are going. They want to see long-term value by a company by investing in electric vehicles, fuel efficiency, renewable energy technologies. They want to look for a reputation and brand when looking at ethical labor practices, diversity, community engagement, help when assessing a company's overall reputation. They want to look at regulatory compliance, failures that can cause legal and financial risks. And they have a lot of demand. They want to have, they know that ESG and social perception, it kind of factors into a lot of people's portfolios. And then they want transparency. They want to be able to look in. They don't want to have to track down people for reporting. They don't want to have to say, boy, this is confusing. So how a company can amass and share this data in a more, kind of transparent way, they're seen as more trustworthy and accountable. So if you want to go to the next, this kind of covers this one. So what is a good model to support this? When you're infusing everything we spoke about today and how, to complete the ESG story using integrated data, you got to start at regulatory compliance, bringing in the automated tracking tools, implemented data-driven processes to ensure compliance and avoid penalties. You got to look at holistic data integration from across the value chain. That includes suppliers, energy uses, your own facility, emissions, labor practices, and then you want to centralize these diverse data sources. You want to have continual supplier engagement, develop a streamlined supplier approval and data exchange along with a third-party certification and compliance framework. Having data accuracy and validation, algorithms with quality checks on real-time data, energy consumption, emissions, waste management, etc. And then IoT comes in, very much so. You have all these IoT sensors and connected devices out there, not only just from the automobiles themselves, but the factories that produce them. How are they helping with predictive analytics? How are they helping share what is actually happening with your plant or your product? Data visualization, I'm not going to be able to say it, but the tools to present a complete, all this is very complex. And to have those accessible formats, to have visual dashboards, to enable decision makers to comprehend some of these insights quickly, for everything from reporting alerts to some alert that a supplier went out of non-compliance. Scenario planning, employee technology to simulate different scenarios, continuous improvement, integrate feedback loops to continuously refine sustainability strategies. So all that comes together, but they all work in harmony. And that's very important when you're trying to establish kind of framework to bring in all this different data and kind of go from there. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But Michael, do you have anything to add here to kind of the idea of bring this all together, making sure everything works in harmony?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, James. Yeah, so at the core of it is data, right? Data is very important into impacting your ESG rating, right? And there is a facilitation of how that data is handled within the organization, and a tool like STEP helps with that, right? It helps supplement the data governance standards that we talked about. It helps with your data quality. It helps with the standardization, and all of that has an impact to your potential ESG rating. So ensuring that your data is right, that you're getting the data from the appropriate supplier, you're doing business with the appropriate supplier. James touched on earlier on the supplier workflow process. I've been on projects where vetting the proper supplier and making sure that that supplier is sourcing materials from a vetted or approved country of origin was very important to the business. So making sure that those governance guidelines are identified and that the technology that is being implemented is fulfilling those requirements. So that is, all of that is important to your ESG rating. And yeah, I do think that, yeah, like I said earlier, at the crux of it, data is key here.
Yeah, yeah, and finding ways to bring data online too as well, because in various suppliers and people within the value chain and supply chain, it's bringing data online to be digitized. A lot of things have been offline forever, or things that weren't accessed. Now with consumer preferences, government regulations, people want access and want the bottom line quickly. So having to dumpster dive for certain information or get things offline, chase down the supplier, or to spend time merging things into Excel to expand to somebody else so it could be able to be viewable in a report, that takes time, and it's definitely not efficient. So bringing those things in, integrating them, having them, because without the data governance above it, you're just going to have mounds of data just flowing in, and you have no way to verify it. So that's the biggest key, is bringing things online, having a centralized data governance system, and then be able to share that across all the interdependent systems so they all can work in harmoniously to either prove an ESG score, have traceability, or just have some visibility into your own product alone. So, without that, with all that said, that's a lot to digest. ESG and automotive, it's an ever-evolving thing that blends, innovations in the industry that's driven by consumer demands and how technology can scale with it. And I think it's very important to think about that, not only for the short term, but in the long term, because this is evolving very fast. So I know it's a lot of information to kind of cram into a 45 minute webinar, especially even at the 30,000 foot level. But Michael, I know you agree, and I know Keith is probably sitting there with some questions posed to us. So I will stop talking. I know most of you are probably saying thank goodness, but open to questions.
Great, yeah. Thank you both for your time today. We can definitely get into some questions in the spirit of autonomous vehicles. I think I needed some help driving those slides, so thank you for rolling with the punches there, gentlemen. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and we can answer them. We had a few come through during the presentation, so we can just kick it off with the first one. So are there any recommended techniques that I can use to get my organization interested in exploring ESG opportunities in the automotive industry? Who wants to take that one?
Sure, I can take that one. Yeah, so I would say to start by identifying the priorities of the organizations, and then once those requirements or goals have been identified, the next step would be to prioritize those requirements with your stakeholders or the executive team. Large organizations typically would have, several social or community or environmental projects, and making sure that those requirements or initiatives align with those community environmental projects is important. So, off the top, based off my research, examples are, it could be like a 25% reduction in carbon emissions by, 2028, a 10% increase in recycle aluminum parts by a certain year, or, a 15% increase of solar or wind turbines to help power factories, are important initiatives that an organization may be interested in, that could help with their ESG scoring.
I'll go on that and give the greedier point of view of it. Fine avoidance, number one, but continuation of business. There's going to be a lot of people, and this has happened even when I left manufacturing, is that you get a letter and saying, show your compliance or you're out. And so a lot of suppliers along that value chain are getting analyzed for these ESG scores. And if you're not able to provide, kind of proof and showing that you have a commitment to it, you could find yourself with a loss of a contract, loss of continual business. You'll have kind of like Michael said, a poor social perception, and that's going to affect your workplace retention and also recruitment. So, and I'm sure with regulatory mitigation on not only just risk and fines, you also have a lot of perks too as well. I know that there's a lot of tax benefits, if you do go through with some of these initiatives. So the benefits are there on both sides, not only just from, just your own personal knowledge that you're doing the right thing, but also on the bottom line too as well, because many people are going, gosh, is this just something expensive that I got to do? But in the end, it's not going to help my bottom line. It actually does.
Great point. Great point. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Let's see. We've got another one here. What do you feel is the best way to ensure traceability is possible through the supply chain?
I can probably take that one. I've ran into similar instances where, in my prior life, where you had to follow the breadcrumbs. You had a part that went bad somewhere, and you want to be able to trace it back through multiple ERPs, MES systems, PLMs, back to, and all through that, the identity of that part has changed probably 10 times, from a supplier item to a PO to a work order to an item code within and to a semi-finished part, so on and so forth. So the key, and what I didn't have then, was the ability to digitize a lot of things that were prior on PDFs or something I had to scan or visually look through. So now with the advent of a lot of digitization, is being able to stick a lot of that and integrate it into a centralized area that through a couple of clicks, you could follow those breadcrumbs back from, a situation where something went bad, or you want to identify a part, all the way back to the supplier, understand what you have, but be able to provide that transparency almost instantaneously to somebody asking for it, because sometimes the delay in not being able to show that right away kind of is a tell that you don't kind of know. So having that easy way to be able to follow those breadcrumbs of your product's path is very key. And I think it starts with integration and bringing more things online so you have that visuals.
Great. Thank you. Michael, anything to add there?
No, I think James said it perfectly there. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I think this one sort of goes along with the last question. I think it's no secret here that there is an immense amount of data coming from a number of different suppliers, industries, product data, all of that. So this one is, how can an organization measure the performance of ESG?
Yeah, I can take that. So when you think about it, ESG ratings are a bit fragmented, right? There are a number of organizations and investment groups like Vanguard, State Street, but it appears that the tendency to make organizations accountable is by external bodies, right? So not only just regulatories, but industry associates or associations and trade bodies. So if you think of like the automotive industry, the aftermarket automotive industry, there's auto care. And I know that, you know, auto care, they meet and they are having conversations around ESG and how to improve the social standings within the organization or those bodies that are associated with auto care. And that kind of ties into the talking point around standardization with the PIEs and ACEs fitments. So it's really, you know, like I said, fragmented, but it's working with associations, right, with external bodies that are tied to the organization.
Very much true, yeah, and that's where it all starts, because and that's where having sometimes a system that's able to act as a translator in between, because many times you are going to get that inconsistent format or something else that's not quite the data that's probably complies with the way it's standardized in many of it. So being able to take that data, translate it into something else that's usable and be able to share it is also very key too as well. So because you just don't want those delays of going, oh, this means that, or hey, we got incomplete data here. You've got to have that standardized formatting. And if you don't, you need to know as an organization what the correct standardized format is and require it from your suppliers, or you don't onboard it, or you don't accept it, or you don't let it into your system, or at least you vet it and govern it as a data steward and say, look, I'm going to clean it up and this is how it is, and then push it on through.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think it's no secret that there's a lot of different standards out there requiring a lot of different formats for reporting and a lot of different data points as well. So the next question is, how does ESG drive innovation and give a firm a competitive advantage? Who wants to take that one to start?
Yeah, I can take that one as well. So I would say, you know, number one is, you know, organization should address ESG challenges, you know, by creating long-term strategic initiatives, right? You know, I don't think this is something that is done within a sprint. This is a marathon that needs to be implemented because you're addressing, you know, environmental, social, governance challenges. However, if you do this right, I do believe the organization will differentiate the business with their competitors, right? And track new customers, attract investors and new stakeholders. So, you know, I believe that, you know, prioritizing the initiatives, making sure that the initiatives are practical, that they align with the goals and mission statement of the business is just as important. I think that just making sure that, you know, there's alignment within the business unit itself is very important.
Yeah, and having those scalable practices too as well, and having something in place that you can, because everything is moving so quickly and so fast, but it's going to keep evolving, and you don't want to find yourself to a point where you're like, gosh, I wish I would have saw this coming. I wish I could go back and change how I started. So it's having that right framework, you know, kind of commitment, foundation to that you can just build upon as everything just evolves, especially anyone from innovation to regulations to customer perception, you know, everything. And then, like Michael said, that's going to increase investment. It's going to increase, you know, the people's perception of your company, and so on and so forth.
Great, thank you. We just got another question into, I think I might have to take this one though. Someone's asking, cute dog, what breed? I think one of them might have popped up in the screen for me, but
Yeah.
he's a American Bulldog Boxer mix. So thank you for that. I know it's not really data related, but still fun to lighten it up a little bit. Let's see. So
I have
no
great
other
Pyrenees
questions.
that was bothering me during the webinar, and everyone's free to have him. So.
That's your dog.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you everyone for your time today. If you have anything that pops in your head, or if you want to get in contact, feel free to add these gentlemen on LinkedIn, or you can contact us at stebosystems.com, or you can contact Michael and his team at goamplify.com. With that being said, I want to thank James and Michael for their time today, and as well as everybody attending. And I hope you learned something from this session, and we're looking forward to connecting in the future. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.